Hey guys, it's me, Chris, the Gucci Redneck. Today we're going to take a look around my 2017 1656 G3 Deluxe and some of the options that came on it that I really love, as well as the install of my 93 SV Garmin Echo Map and LVS 32 Panoptix livescope. Stick along and we're going to check this thing out. Alright guys, so let's dive into some of these upgrades and options I was talking about. Some of them highlighted on a little bit of reel before. The big one here on the motor end is the UHMW CNC machine top-notch intake. That is a huge upgrade over the factory cast molded intake foot. It just takes way more abuse. Just a matter of what it's made out of. And top-notch CNC Machining Inc. is a local company here in Pennsylvania. They make a great product, and I've always enjoyed dealing with them. I guess as a quick disclaimer before we start talking about some of these things, I'm not sponsored by anybody, just an average Joe. And if I, point out something that I'm using, it's not because it's the best. It's just because it's what I've used, and I've had good experience with it, so I'm going to share it with you guys. The next thing that was done to this boat before I got it is the K5 polyurea spray-on coating. That's that black that you see around the bottom of the boat. It goes over the whole lower portion of the hull of the boat that is in contact with the water. It has a shiny coating on it, which is Wetlander. That's a coating that is sprayed on, applied after they put the the K5 polyurea on. This stuff is not UHMW. That stuff is quite a bit more stout and a lot more labor intensive of a process to put it on. But nonetheless, here where I run the Susquehanna, the Juniata, a lot of the tributaries around, we don't have a whole lot of soft bottom. It's all big rocks, boulders, and you're going to bang around, especially if you're fishing, during the low water months of the summertime. So that K5, not necessarily going to make your boat bulletproof, but it's going to make it a lot more durable. It's also going to allow you, when you're just beating the banks in the summertime, doing a lot of controlled drifting with the trolling motor, to slide over things that otherwise might snag you up and really grab a hold of that aluminum. Now that that K5 coating is on there, it really gives you some added insurance, is the best way to put it. Next thing I want to do is jump up front here. All right, now we're up here on the front of the boat. I have a Minnkota Terrova. This is a 24 volt, 80 pound thrust trolling motor. It does have the US2, the standard, sonar puck. I actually have that, disengaged. Before I put this livescope unit on, when I purchased the Garmin 93 SV, it came with a side clear view transducer, which I just followed some videos online. It's mounted on here on the actual head of the unit with the standard hardware it comes with. I just took apart the trolling motor. I had to disassemble the head to remove the whole shaft out of the unit, and then I marine epoxied this cable in the groove in the shaft the whole way up through, daylighted it up here, brought it back down and back to the unit. Pretty simple install. There's a lot of videos out there on YouTube of how to do that. Appreciate those guys for putting that content out there because it made my job a lot easier. the most time-consuming process of that whole thing was actually waiting for that marine epoxy to dry. It took almost 2 days for it to cure up, that I was comfortable putting things back together and knowing it wasn't going to go anywhere. Now, so I do have this I think it's the GT54, is the side scan clear view transducer that I have. Like I said, that came with the unit, but I wanted to go ahead and give this live scoping a try. You know, probably in the next video I put out, it's going to be more of, you know, us out on the river fishing. And I don't think that live scope fishing on the river is going to necessarily cause me to catch any more or any less fish. Probably actually less fish, because I'll be busy messing around with this thing rather than casting my line. But I do think it's really cool technology. And the one new thing in the last couple of years I want to say with livescope is this perspective mode. And how I see it is that's almost like side scan, but live imaging side scan. You're getting a full picture of the bottom, you know, kind of looking on it from the top down, and you can actually see fish swimming around from what I've seen. Now, like I said, next video I do, I'm going to do a little bit of on the water and, you know, some fishing. You know, this time of year, pre-spawn, you know, a lot of the fish are starting to move to their tributaries or spawning grounds. So we know where the fish are, but like instead of hunting for them when we go into the mouth of a creek or, you know, gravelly area that's known, you know, for fish to stage up on to get ready to spawn, rather than hunting around to see, you know, where they're at and what they're doing, I'm hoping to be able to drop this live scope in there and, you know, see where the fish are so I know exactly where I need to cast, and then see how they're responding to the various baits. Now, I will say, this time of year, I kind of like the live line, you know, throwing shiners on drop shots, different techniques, kind of like that way. Probably 2-3 years ago, I was out with a good friend of mine who hopefully will be out with us on Friday fishing, and we saw 2 older gentlemen come into an area, more of a community hole area, it's no secret, and they went by us, we exchanged gestures, and they anchored up above us, and they started throwing these shiners around, and they just absolutely annihilated the bass. They caught probably 10-1 compared to us that evening, and they just had a blast. And I looked at my buddy and I said, hey, what's wrong with throwing live bait? You know, because a lot of guys anymore, it's like, oh, well, if you're not fishing this or you're not fishing that, there's a stigma associated with fishing live bait. And I was like, I'm not sponsored by anybody, you know. I was like, why don't we give it a try? So we started doing it mainly as a pre-spawn technique where we knew where the fish were, you know, the patterns were pretty obvious to us, and you were able to get in on large numbers of fish that were staging up to go into spawn, and they were feeding ferociously. So we're, you know, targeting these fish and dropping shiners in, and we're just catching them left and right and having an absolute ball. The other thing, you know, in hindsight, now that I've done this for a couple years, I used to throw jerk baits a lot in the spring, swim baits, but a lot of jerk baits. And one of the problems I have with the jerk baits is, you know, some of them have 3 treble hooks in them, and you're catching these bass, and they have hooks in their face, in their eyes, in their gills, in the sides of them, hooks everywhere. And not that there's anything wrong with that, because I still love to throw a jerk bait. But, you know, fishing a single hook drop shot technique with a live shiner, and just plugging that fish right in the mouth, having the fight, reeling them in, high-fiving with my buddies, and then putting them back in, you know, to fight another day, I don't see anything wrong with it. So if you're interested in that, tune in to the next video, and you'll get to check out kind of what we're doing, how we're fishing them. It's a blast, and I'd recommend it to anybody. But I did want to talk about the install on this. It was pretty straightforward. You know, I needed a couple drill bits for different size holes to get my wires down through the hull. And then, you know, I used a fish tape to pull my wires where I needed them. I actually designated a 40 amp hour lithium battery from MillerTech that I located in my one storage hatch up here that I'll show you guys in a minute, as well as the black box for the live scope. And so I drilled a couple holes. You know, I started with my precision sonar mount, which is this CNC machine mount that attaches specifically to this Terrova to keep the transducer up away from the bottom and the trolling motor. It also, houses the cord nicely. It really turns out to be a professional install. And guys, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. Some of my stuff turns out and looks pretty good, and I always try for that, but sometimes it's ugly and it's just functional, and that just is what it is. But this precision sonar mount really made this install a lot easier and really helped it turn out really nice. So I have that's 2 bolts here, another bolt here. This is the Garmin perspective mount, which you need to turn this transducer into that perspective mode. It just angles it a little differently. There's also some videos floating around out there. Guys have used pieces of iron or aluminum, bent them to mimic the same shape, and they probably work too, but I just went ahead and got the one from Garmin. And then ran everything up through, used electrical tape because, in my opinion, electrical tape has some give to it, so it's not going to allow this stuff to bind up if I overturn it and things get tight. And then I ran my transducer wire down through the hull, back to this battery back here. So if you're familiar with these boats, they have 2 compartments in the front. I tend to keep my tackle box up front dead center, partially weight distribution and ease of access, but I do have a modified milk crate here that I just carry a bunch of extra spare plastics and odds and ends that I'm probably not fishing with that day, but I always like to have all my stuff with me because you just never know what the bite's going to be sometimes, and if you don't have it, you can't throw it. But what I did here was I just brought all my wires down through the hull. I had to punch 2 holes in the side of the bin, which I just on Amazon picked up little grommets, rubber grommets that I put inside the hole then to protect the wire from chafing, from going through a hole. Anytime you're installing any of these marine electronics or electronics in general, you should always be concerned about protecting the wires. And in here, I mounted off to the one side. It takes up about 9.5, 10 inches. My black box, which has my transducer cable into it and my network cable that goes back out of here and takes it back up to the graph, as well as my battery. What I ended up doing was using a battery tie down and then actually a piece of the packing material, which is like a closed cell foam. I just think that that's going to give some shock absorption from this battery bouncing around being on the trailer, whether it be out on the water, and help protect the circuitry inside of here from being disturbed. But relatively simple install, other than drilling a couple of the holes through the hull and then just fishing wire, it was really plug and play. I gotta say, the instructions that come from Precision Sonar Mount and Garmin are really simple to follow. Not technical, pretty easy to do, and I think just about anybody could do it. But that's what I got going on in there. Underneath my console, I have my trolling motor batteries. They're both MillerTechs as well, 55 amp hour. I did the same thing with them. I actually used a piece of the packing, and it fit pretty nicely, a little tight, I might say, into Group 27 battery trays. Again, I think that's going to give a little bit of shock absorption to these batteries, help keep the circuitry protected. But I know lithium batteries are a big question probably for a lot of people, and they are a huge investment. I was able to save a little bit of money recently when I bought these 3 MillerTechs on a discount code, which was Classic 20, and I believe that discount code's still active if you guys wanted to try to use it. If you were in the market to buy lithium batteries, I definitely would recommend MillerTech. I think they're based out of Ohio, and really good company, and I've been using them probably for 6 or 7 years on various boats that I've had now. But lithiums, are just a far superior product. The big thing for me, what intrigued me about going to them, was the weight savings. So I have I have 4 lithium batteries in my boat. Combined, they weigh 60 pounds. So that's 4 batteries, total of 60 pounds, about 15 pounds of battery. Whereas, you know, 1 AGM cranking battery for a boat like this weighs 45 pounds. You know, 2 trolling motor AGM batteries, you know, together 90 pounds, and then say another one for a livescope. I mean, you're talking almost 200 pounds of batteries, but right now I'm running 60, and they're spread out over my boat. So it helps with weight distribution, which I find really beneficial in a riverboat. Also, you know, something that I wasn't totally aware of when I got into the lithium, you know, battery source was that these things run basically to zero. In your regular lead acid and AGM batteries, you get a voltage drop once the battery hits about 50% of its charge. And that starts to really affect the performance of all these high-end electronics that all of us are running nowadays. Whereas lithiums, you don't get the substantial voltage drop, and the performance, you know, is there when you need it. And I've been out on the water. I fished a local tournament a couple weeks ago with my cousin, and I spent a lot of the day in spot lock and trolling around. Fish were really spread out. It was cold. It was rainy. Really had to move around to find fish that wanted to bite. Not necessarily find fish, but find ones that wanted to play the game. And I ended up, I think I came home that evening after being on the water for 10 or 12 hours, and my batteries were at 62%. I just think that's amazing. Like, this boat is not a light rig, but, you know, I can't speak, you know, if you're going to do, you know, one thing to really help you in a shallow water riverboat setup, it's finding ways to make yourself lighter. And lithium batteries are a huge component to that. All right, guys. Well, that about wraps it up for the few of the upgrades that I thought were noteworthy on my G3. And hopefully next time I'm coming to you from the water with a little bit of fishing footage and kind of what we're doing and what we're looking for. The pattern this time of year, you know, early springtime, is pretty easy to figure out on the river. But, you know, for those of you guys maybe that are new or just looking for another tip or trick, you know, maybe I'll have something in that video for you guys. I also will give a little more of my take on the perspective mode, the live scope, kind of if I find it useful or if I just wasted a fair amount of money on something that probably doesn't apply to my style of fishing. Either way, you know, I did get the nickname the Gucci Redneck because I like gizmos and I'm a redneck. So I'm going to give it a fair shake and check it out, and I'll give you guys my honest opinion on it, how it applies to river fishing, creek fishing. A lot of the stuff that I was able to find on YouTube when I was researching this before I made any decisions to buy anything were largely, you know, guys that are lakes, glass boats, not so much guys that, you know, are fishing the rocky rivers and looking for smallies, but that's me, and, you know, that's what I'm doing out there. So I'm going to see if the tech applies to my style of fishing and if I think it makes a difference or not, and I'll report back to you guys. But till next time, thanks for watching.
Country road, take me home to the place